Folks, we're going to be starting in about 5 or 7 minutes, so get yourself organized, pit stops early, be comfortable.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Mindy Holland, and I'm the campaign chair for Jewish Federation. I want to thank you all for joining us for our second community-wide gathering in 3 weeks' time. Thank you to the College of St. Rose for allowing us to host this gathering at the Masry Center for the Arts on your campus. For safety and security purposes, let me get into flight attendant mode here. Okay, here we go. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building in a calm and orderly manner. Better here, better here. Better back here. Better, good? Okay, in a calm and orderly manner. We are on the first floor. Do not use the elevators. Please use the exit stairwells. The fire exit doors and stairwells are located in the rear east entrance, in the south side, and the north side and the west side entrance of the recital hall. People sitting towards the front of the recital hall will please exit by the doors at the front. The closest stairwell is located to the right of the performance stage. If you have special needs or may need assistance, please contact one of the security officers or a volunteer here today before the start of the event. Now, I want to welcome our elected officials who have joined us in solidarity this evening. We have two members of the Albany Common Council, members Deborah Zamer and Jack Flynn. Welcome. There you go. And from Schenectady County Legislator, Michelle Osterlich. Welcome, Michelle. Before I formally introduce our wonderfully talented cellist, please allow me to share the following update on our fundraising and goals and efforts. JFNA, the Jewish Federations of North America, set an ambitious campaign goal of $500 million in direct response to the needs in Israel currently. This is an initial goal. The number will rise as the needs do. Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York was tasked with raising $2.1 million of the $500 million goal. To date, we have secured over $1,240,000 from 717 donors. Our rigorous work since October 7 has only been possible because we existed on October 6. We can achieve the goal of 2.1 million, and we will, with your support. The strength of Jewish Federation through our annual campaign is why we are here and ready to respond. In your program, please find all the options for giving listed in the program. Please consider making a donation tonight, whether for the first time or the second. Please give. And now, I want to introduce Laura Melnicoff. She joined the Albany Jewish community in November of 2020. Originally from New York City, Laura has a master's degree in cello performance from Tel Aviv University, where she interned in the cello section of the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. Her concerts have taken her to major stages, both nationally and internationally. Her performance career continues alongside her work in music education, including at the Hebrew Academy of the Capital Region. Laura. Thank you. Please join me in welcoming community leaders Nir Golub and Hank Greenberg for the armchair discussion.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. We come together almost as a family with a common denominator. And tonight we hope to shed some information that will help you to better understand what's gone on and what is going on. We're fortunate that we have in our community Steve Berk, and he's going to lead us off with answering a couple questions to set the stage. But my friend Hank Greenberg has just come back from Israel and has a lot of really good stuff to share with us. He and I are going to have a dialogue. We've done this before, and it's something that we think you'll get a lot of good benefit from. So with that, I'd like to introduce Stephen Berk. Stephen, professor at Union College, our world expert on Israel and the Middle East. Yes, sir.
Thank you all very much. Good evening to all of you, and thank you for coming. On October 7th, Hamas did exactly what it said it would do. It murdered, it raped, it killed, it burned people alive. I said it did what I said that they did what they wanted to do and what they said they would do. In 1988, Hamas was founded and a charter was proclaimed. The charter said, no peace with Israel, no recognition, no compromise. Israel has to be wiped off the face of the earth. The charter also called upon Muslims everywhere to kill Jews. So on October 7th, that's exactly what they did. Hamas is a genocidal organization. There should be no illusions about it. And when his followers make that statement you see on television at the colleges and the universities, we want a Palestine from the river to the sea. The river is the Jordan, the sea is the Mediterranean. That means there is no place for the state of Israel. It means that Hamas is hell-bent on eliminating close to 10 million people. Hamas chose its time very, very well. Give the devil the credit that it is due. That is, Hamas looked upon an Israel that was polarized over this issue of judicial reform. Hamas also looked at the fact that thousands of reservists said that they would not serve. In the end, as we all know, they did serve. But as I tell my students, I've drummed it into them for 56 years, perception is reality. It's not really what happened that's important, it's what people believe what happened. In fact, Hamas saw an Israel that was vulnerable. And finally, of course, prodded by Iran, Hamas served a purpose for Iran and for those of a like bent. What I mean by that is, Israel was on the verge of having a rapprochement with Saudi Arabia. Israel had achieved the Abraham Accords. Hamas's action, among other things, was designed not only to weaken Israel, but of course to undermine, to torpedo those accords, and only history will judge whether they were successful. On the Israeli side, I say with burning sorrow, the response was abysmal. Or to use the cliche that you often hear on television, the Israelis lost their concentration on the ball. Their eyes weren't on the ball. They were looking east to the West Bank. One could understand that. It's from the West Bank that terrorists came and killed a number of Israeli families. They were also caught up, focusing on, again, that issue of the judicial reform. There were problems here. And, of course, the Israelis, and now, as we know, also the CIA, relied too heavily on technology. It is an axiom in intelligence organizations that all the technology in the world is not as good as having one of your own people highly placed in the enemy echelons. By relying on cyber stuff, relying on, let's say, all the technology, both the United States and the state of Israel really did not cultivate that human intelligence that is so essential. And there was also what is known as the conception. When I deal with this with my students, I tell them there's a transcendental question here. How do you deal with evil? Do you think you can manage evil? The Israelis thought they knew what Hamas stood for. They knew that Hamas was hell-bent on really getting rid of all of them. But the Israelis thought they could manage it. They could contain it. And how would they contain it? By letting 18,000 people from the Gaza Strip come to work in Israel. This supposedly, according to Israeli intelligence, would create a disincentive for Hamas to launch an attack upon Israel. Because, of course, it would disrupt the economy. These 8,000 people couldn't go to work. What Israel did not understand, what the United States did not understand, that it is not economics that drives politics. It's politics that drives economics. It didn't make a damn bit of difference for Hamas how many times the people of the Gaza Strip suffered. They weren't concerned about that. They wanted to destroy the state of Israel. They wanted to weaken the state of Israel. The conception was wrong. The Israelis are going to have to learn many, many lessons. And this you can take to the bank. When all of this is over, there will be an investigating commission examining every aspect of what happened on October 7th. And, again, heads are going to roll. But this is not the time. It's not the time in Israel. It's not the time for American Jews to criticize Netanyahu or anybody else. That will come with time. Now the issue is to stay fast. Or to put it another way, again, I'm a Russian and Soviet historian by training. In the 19th century, groaning on the Tsarist repression, the Russian revolutionaries asked the question. In Russian, it is "Что делать?" What is to be done? And the answer for us, Jewish Americans, supporters of Israel, is to stay the course. Support Israel until victory over Hamas. There is now talk of a pause. Perhaps a pause that lasts 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. Maybe that's the right thing to do. To placate President Biden, to placate American public opinion and European public opinion. But by no stretch of the imagination should there be a ceasefire that lasts more than one day. Because if there's a ceasefire, it will work to the advantage of Hamas. So stay fast, stand fast on this. I close by saying to you what a rabbi said around 1940. That was an even more difficult time. Our people were under the gun in German-occupied Europe. And you know what that rabbi said? I'm going to say it to you. If you have a rendezvous with destiny, you better make sure you come on time. This is our time. If you respond, if the Israelis show the tenacity, the skill, the bravery that they've always shown in the past, and if American Jews and their supporters and supporters of Israel stand fast, supply Israel with the financial, military, and political aid that is so essential, then truly it can be said of us, despite everything that has happened, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people are still alive and well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Paul. He's always amazing. Can you hear okay? Sound good for everybody? Yeah. Good, very good. Does this work? Yeah, good. Hank Greenberg, you just took a trip to Israel. Tell us how that came about.
It came about rather suddenly. The war was little more than a week old when the Jewish Federations for North America placed a call to the regions, one of which is the Northeastern region, which we are all a part of. And I was approached by the leadership and asked to consider leaving. I had gone on a similar mission, if you will, about a year and a half earlier to the Ukrainian border, the Polish-Ukrainian border. This seemed like an extraordinary opportunity for our community to gather information and come back on moments like now and tell you what I saw and what I heard.
Well, I have to tell you, it takes a little bit of courage to do what you did, because there's not a lot of people that would have jumped into the middle of the battle. You got an opportunity to be near Ashkelon, and you had some overwhelming experiences there. Share with us a little bit about what you saw in Ashkelon.
Ashkelon is very close to ground zero of the attack on October 7. It's part of the Gaza envelope near the Gaza Strip, about 8 miles away from it. It's a city of about 170,000 people. And it has the Barzilai Medical Center, which is the largest freestanding hospital in that part of Israel, which took in and treated the highest number of casualties from October 7. There were so many things that we saw there. The easy things were bombing sites. On October 7, Hamas terrorists launched anywhere between 5,000 to 8,000 rockets. Israel's Iron Dome, its missile protection system, functioned well, but it was not designed to cope with that kind of onslaught of missiles. So many of them landed in Ashkelon, and it appears as though as many as 6,000 to 9,000 residents were destroyed, both by the terrorists as well as the bombings. In Ashkelon, we met with the mayor. We spoke to, people whose children were murdered. We saw various volunteer groups. But one of the most stunning things, Neil, was my experience at the hospital.
Mm-hmm. You tell us about the hospital. What was it that you saw there that moved you?
Well, this was the hospital on day one of the war, October 7. Just keep in mind, that was a day when 1,400 Jews were slaughtered. That's more Jews that died in a single time than any time since the Holocaust. That's vastly more Jews than died during Kristallnacht. More than 200 Israelis, American citizens, and others were taken hostage on October 7. So to put it in American terms, 1,400 people dying in Israel on one day, that's about 55 to 60,000 Americans. 200 or so hostages, that's about 10,000 hostages. And consider this as a country, 1/3 of its territory is under constant air assault. But at this hospital, its director, Hezi Levy, who himself is a remarkable man. He spent more than 3 decades with the IDF. He was a soldier by training, a surgeon by training, but he was in charge of the medical corps for the IDF. He also just recently was the health minister for the entire nation with responsibility for addressing the COVID-19 epidemic, and now he was running this large, modern, state-of-the-art hospital. So he was one of several people who gave a presentation, and in substance, here's what he said. A few things. First, he described what the morning of October 7 was like. The war began at roughly 6:30 a.m. Casualties began coming to the hospital's emergency room at about 8 a.m. In 3 hours' time, the emergency room, the surgical wards were filled with over 300 casualties. A few hours later, soldiers began coming in, more than 80. 20 of them were dead. Corpses were coming in the door. And Dr. Levy said, 30 years in the military, he has seen every kind of wartime casualty you could imagine, usually shrapnel, bullet wounds, and the like. But nothing in his life, he's 64 years old, prepared him for what he saw. He saw a pregnant woman's stomach ripped open and a baby removed. He saw people who were shot with high-velocity weapons within inches of where the firing took place into organs, mutilated bodies and faces. Nothing in his life's experience, he said, prepared him for those sights. He was followed by a few other people, a nurse who described his experiences, and then something, I think, in the United States, we wouldn't even know what this is, right? A person whose responsibility at the hospital is speaking to the victims of wars and those who lost their life. 24-year-old woman trained as a psychologist. She was the person on October 7 and the days thereafter, as families came to the hospital to find out what became of their loved ones, she was the one who would have to leave and go outside and call out the name. Ms. Goldsman, Ms. Schwartz, the family members, and tell them their loved one had died. We spoke to a surgeon who, like Dr. Levy, described operations on bodies that had been decimated. And then Dr. Levy showed us a part of the hospital that on the evening of the 7th was bombed. And he said, with as much emotion as you can imagine coming from a 64-year-old man who had seen decades of war, he said, "We don't bomb hospitals, they bomb hospitals," referring to the false reports that Israel had bombed a hospital in Gaza, which within 48 hours news sources described, and all Western nations said didn't happen. So that was, we can talk about other things that we saw during the time, but that in itself, and seeing some of the bomb sites and people who survived it, was chilling.
You let yourself get involved actually in the action, so to speak. You were under missile attack. Tell us about how you felt, what your experiences, how you felt inside your guts when missiles are on their way in. Tell us what happened.
3 air raids in 2 days.
Yes.
And just as a footnote, it wasn't because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is what every Israeli, particularly in the South and in the North, is experiencing now. The first attack was in Ashkelon. I was in a bus with my 21 colleagues or so who came with us, and we had a retired IDF soldier who JNF was desperately concerned with our security. And we felt safe in large measure because they constantly sort of told us what would happen when we hear an air raid, although they said, "You're going to hear an air raid." I didn't know that before I went. But we were in a bus. and you heard the sound of the air raid, and our security officer told the bus driver, stop immediately. He then told us to run across a lawn, I would say about 50 yards to a fence, and lay face down. I will tell you at that moment, it was more of an out-of-body experience, right? It felt surreal. I wasn't processing it as fear or anything like that, but sort of, is this really happening? So we did. 21 of us ran across the lawn, laid face down, and then heard like a pop noise in the sky. Pop, pop, pop. That's a noise that is a godsend to the Israeli people. That is the Iron Dome knocking down the missiles that triggered the air raid. And our security officer pointed up to the sky, and there we saw 3 rockets that had exploded over our head. Later, it's an interesting story. Before I left, I spent a day in Tel Aviv where my law firm has an office, and I was at this luncheon. For people who have smartphones, there's an app that they all have. It's called Red Alert, and it's keyed to Israel's extraordinarily sophisticated radar system. So the radar system picks up a missile that's launched from Gaza or by Hezbollah, or south in Gaza, north and by Hezbollah. It picks it up right away, and it comes on your phone, right? And it says where the missile is going. So I'm sitting with some of my colleagues, and we're talking, having a pleasant luncheon, until all of them reach for their cell phone and look down and say, we have to go. And where we had to go was a safe room in this skyscraper in Tel Aviv. And the last day was when I was in the airport. I couldn't sleep while I was in Israel, not just jet lag. I mean, the whole experience was so gripping and intense. If I could get an hour's sleep, I wouldn't know. I just felt like I was awake the whole time. So now I'm at the airport. We're getting ready to go home. We're at Ben Gurion, and I'm in this lounge, and I feel this like grip, this rude sort of shaking of me, and it's a guy with a gun that's saying, you have to run. There's an air raid. I'm telling you this, Neil, only because this was not, for an Israeli, an unusual experience. For me, it was.
Well, yes, yeah. Where do I run? You're
Right?
Point.
But they have endured this for years. Part of Hamas's strategy before the war, as well as Hezbollah, is to make Israel unlivable. I mean, imagine in the capital region, if one day we heard a rocket attack. I mean, we couldn't think about it, right? You would evacuate, Del Mar, New York, instantaneously if there was an experience like that. But they have inured themselves to that, and has become a norm of their life. October 7, of course, was anything but.
I understand from what you told us that the amount of volunteerism that occurred while you were there was substantially different than it had been in the past. And I've even heard some of the ultra-Orthodox have decided to join the armed forces and the Israeli Defense Forces. Tell us about.
All hands on deck. An entire nation mobilized for war. 360,000 reservists have been called up, from teenagers to the elderly. If people are not serving in the military, they're finding something productive and constructive to support the war effort and to address the needs of the victims. I'll give you one example, and for me this was actually a startling thing to know. Israel's called up 360,000 people to serve in the military. They don't have 360,000 uniforms to fit them.
That was my next question, yes. Okay.
Right? And if you think about it, sure, they were not prepared for anything remotely close to this. So what's popped up around the country is as many as 20 different sites in which local philanthropists and others are contributing money to these sites, which are largely run by teenagers, people not quite of age to get into the military, with laptop computers who are taking orders from soldiers for something like digital watches, right? I don't have a watch. I have a smartphone, right? But that's not going to do you any good if you're fighting street by street in Gaza. So the military doesn't have 360,000 digital watches. So community leaders, philanthropists, and others, people like you that are living in Israel and others, Norm Masri, whose beautiful Performing Arts Center we're in today, are contributing money, my law firm, for example, and these sites are buying tactical helmets, right? Ceramic vests that will protect people from absorbing a bullet. And here I was in this room with 16, 17, 18-year-old kids taking these orders, then reporting to commanders in the field. While I was in this one site, Shaim, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv, a 23-year-old commander walked in, 23. He looked like a child. He had a job in Tel Aviv, and now he's a commander with troops. And he walks in and he says, "Can I get 20 tactical helmets?" So that's one example. In Jerusalem, I saw this extraordinary operation, multi-floors. It was actually sort of a performing arts center in the middle of Jerusalem. Every floor was taken up by volunteers buying clothes, toys for children. There was a war room, there was food. You know, a hard fact to sort of wrap your mind around, and there hasn't been much reporting about it, is that Israel has evacuated virtually everyone that lived in the south. That's 200,000 people in a nation of a little more than 9 million. Where do they go? Well, there are more than 50,000 hotel rooms that are available in Israel, and more than half of them are occupied by these evacuees. These are the people who are in the South and survived. And they don't obviously have jobs, they don't have homes, they could carry nothing with them other than the clothes that they were wearing. So the volunteer effort is extraordinary in Israel.
You had a lot of discussions with people. Let me just say this. There are notes out if people want to ask questions, because we are going to have a Q&A when we finish. We'd like you to write your questions down and hand them into Federation people who are on both sides, and they'll read the questions if you can do that for us. Okay. You talked to a lot of people. What are some of the things that you learned?
Maybe the most searing conversations were with the evacuees. We traveled to a kibbutz, about 10 miles outside of Jerusalem in central Israel, where a hotel was now entirely occupied by 500 evacuees from a few of the kibbutzes that had been decimated, and spoke to people that described the attack in real time. And that was terrifying. And they described 6:30 a.m., this one person. They hear rockets, no big deal. They hear rockets all the time. But now they hear wave of rockets after wave of rockets, one after the other. And then a little time goes by, and they're sitting in their safe room in their house, which is usually where the children live. That's the part of their homes in the southern border that are constructed to be able to absorb direct impacts from rockets, potential direct impacts. And then describing how they start to hear gunfire, and they know at that moment something is truly amiss. And then they're hearing Arabic voices yelling, and they're hearing that as they're hugging their children tightly. They hear gunfire in the kibbutz. They hear screams. Some of them run. That was not a good move because there was nowhere to run outside these kibbutzes, right? And some survived. Some of the kibbutzes lost 25% of their population. But to your specific question, as they would describe this story, they clearly have not yet, some people have described Israel as now as a nation experiencing PTSD, and they don't mean post-traumatic stress disorder. They mean present traumatic stress order. So a few of the people describing it, the effect, their affect, were obviously people who had experienced truly near-death encounters. But it didn't take long, and we heard this repeatedly, for people to begin to express anger. Obviously anger at the terrorists, but a sense of abandonment in the South. One woman was saying, we're waiting an hour. When is the IDF coming? 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours. When are they going to come to save us? So, you know.
What happened? Why didn't they come?
Well, I think Dr. Berk sort of captured the idea. Israel took its eye off the ball. And, you know, one person described it for me this way. We're all familiar with the phrase, never again, right?
Sure are.
It's not a mere slogan, right? It's a mantra born of 2 millennia of suffering. But this one woman is like hitting the table saying, never again meant never again. It happened again. And it happened again. And there's a social contract in Israel between the government and the people. And someone described it as the first, second, and third rule of the government's responsibility: keep us safe, keep us safe, keep us safe. And that didn't happen on October 7th, obviously. It's very clear that, as Dr. Berk said, in time there will be an investigation. Right? This happened, by the way, during the 73 war. Everything old is new again, right? The 73 war was truly, as it was happening, an existential threat to Israel. From Egypt, tanks crossed makeshift bridges through the Suez Canal. From the Golan Heights, Syria was rolling in tanks. Israel, just a few years after the Six-Day War, came this close to ceasing to exist. Labor, which had an iron grip on power, no one could ever think of the day when they wouldn't. Investigations came and heads rolled, figuratively, afterwards. Israel's too busy now fighting a war. They have a unity government at this moment. They have come together. The differences that led to hundreds of thousands of people protesting are gone. There is a single-minded determination to prevail. But in due course, when this war is over and Israel will prevail, we will find out, I think, in graphic detail what happened and why.
There was a vast political upheaval months before this all occurred. Did you hear any comments about that?
Yes. The last evening we were in Israel, we heard a speech from a retired Major General, Noam Timon, former head of the paratroopers, brilliant guy, educated in part in America.
Noah Tibon.
Yes.
T-I-B-O-N.
Correct.
Tibon, right.
And he was featured in 60 Minutes a few weeks ago. You know, a genuine, real deal war hero, not only when he was with the IDF, but as 60 Minutes sort of dramatized. It's an extraordinary story. His son lived in one of the kibbutzes that were under attack with his wife and his children. He called his father, who told him to remain safe. His father and his wife take a pistol, get in a car, drive through roadblocks, avoid roadblocks, get to the kibbutz, save the lives of others, as well as his son, his daughter-in-law, and his grandchildren. You know, so he described that story, but at the end of the speech, he said, for American Jews, know this, we will win. Have no doubt about that. We need your help, but we will win. He said it will be difficult. It's war. It will be painful and ugly, but we will win. And after we win, those people who were responsible for October 7th will be held accountable.
Sounds like they lost their way. Sounds like they got too busy with too many other things. The tunnels are not well known to the American people, and the tunnels make up the base of where Hamas delivers their power. What can you tell us that you learned about the tunnels?
Well, this war is unlike many wars that America's fought and even Israel's fought with respect to Hamas and the Gaza Strip. The geographic configuration is not, as you would imagine, a place where there are these obvious military targets, military airports, military bases that are large, that can be identified as a target for someone who's fighting a war against it. Tragically for the Palestinian people who live in Gaza, tragically, immorally, Hamas has built their military infrastructure in civilian populations, underneath civilian populations, apartment buildings, with an extraordinarily complex tunnel system. So in order to get to that, Israel is left with the conundrum of how do you get to that? How do you take out sites where 8,000 rockets were launched when the rocket launchers are built on top of apartment buildings? So this is a unique military challenge for Israel, which is as committed, if not more committed, I would say the most committed of any nation in the world to fighting a war consistent with the most scrupulous standards of the laws of war in international war. No other nation in the world, Neil, no other nation, while it was fighting a war against another country, would provide its electricity and water supply. Just imagine in America, if one day we woke up and 55,000 Americans were dead and 10,000 were taken hostage and missile attacks were fired on Miami, New York City, Dallas, and LA. How would we respond? Israel experienced 15 9/11s in one day. In one day. We know how America responded in Kabul and Afghanistan, in Iraq. We know how other nations have responded to war. Israel is held to standards by others, but they hold themselves to these standards. So I rest easy knowing that Israel's leadership, most of all its military, will do as well as is possible to at once defend their right to exist and discharge their war responsibilities as morally as they can.
As the people of Israel fight, the economy takes a really big hit, macro and micro. Tell us what you know.
Think COVID-19, March 2020, April, May. The economy is shut down for all intents and purposes. It's a tourist-based economy to a significant, not entirely, to a significant degree. There is no tourism, obviously. I stayed at a hotel in Jerusalem where there were only 14 people living in the hotel, 8% occupancy. Jerusalem was a ghost town. The streets at night, usually bustling, were empty. 360,000 people, that's the heart of your economy, are now in military service, right? So they're not producing goods and services. The South, the agricultural region, well, there's nobody there at the moment to sort of do any of that kind of work. So the economy is devastated, and they are doing the best they can, thank God, with the support of the United States government, which is in itself doing whatever it can to provide relief and assistance. And we can talk a little bit about it, thank God, to the American Jewish community. For what it has done and will need to do in the weeks and months to come.
What is it that we need to do?
We need to give and give and give till it hurts. This is our moment. This is my
Our moment. Yes.
our moment.
Yes.
This is my generation's moment. My grandfather's generation, I see some people who are younger than me, that would be your great-grandparents' generation, that was the War of Independence in 1948. In Albany, some people went to Canada to run guns in order for there to be a Jewish state. For my mother and father's generation, it was the Six-Day War in '67, or the 1973 war, the Yom Kippur War. That was their moment. Now American Jewry is called to defend and support and do everything it can for Israel in its time of agony and need. And the only thing we can to make a difference in their lives is to make contributions. Mindy sort of described the very ambitious goal. I say it's ambitious, it's going to be realized. God bless you, God bless Norman Masry, God bless the more than 700 people in our community that have raised in a matter of 3 weeks $1.1 million. The goal is $2.1 million. I would just refer everybody to the back of the program tonight. You'll see a variety of ways of giving. You know, we know it's in our DNA. It's who we are. It's what we are. It's what makes the Jewish people so very, very special. We understand if one Jew suffers anywhere, all Jews suffer everywhere. The Inquisition, the Pharaoh, the Russian Empire's pogroms, the Holocaust has taught us well. Never again, will forevermore be never again. And American Jewry has an enormous job in front of it, and I know it will do it.
We have to be strong, and thank you for your voice. Thank you for your energy, and thank you for your love of the people and what it is that we have to do. Have I missed anything that you'd like to cover?
Oh, I think we've gotten it.
Great. Questions from the audience?
Hi. Thank you, gentlemen, both of you. I'm going to try to consolidate questions. Number one, what is your advice for college law students who are experiencing anti-Semitism on campus or dealing with anti-Semitic professors? We hear that a lie travels around the world faster than the truth, and so how do we combat that?
Well, I'll talk in general and specific to law schools. We are experiencing right now in America, certainly in my lifetime, I think you have to go back to the 1930s to find any parallel to the degree of anti-Semitism that is marinating us now. In 3 weeks, a 400% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the state of New York, and we were already at historic highs before the war. College campuses have become, for Jewish students, dangerous places to be. And law schools, including in the capital region, are experiencing on campus alarming incidents. I have my own view. Part of it is not to deny it. Denial is not a life strategy, and it's not going to work with what's going on in college campuses. Federation has been magnificent. We're going to be meeting with leaders of academic institutions, and I think part of it is explaining to them that this kind of conduct is not acceptable. The double standard is not acceptable. College communities, law schools, rightly, justly, appropriately, when there were horrific acts of racial violence that traumatized all of us in America in just the last few years, universities and campuses knew what to do. They condemned it. And yet, people couldn't figure out for a few days what to do after the most barbaric attacks since, the Holocaust. So,
thank you. How is it that Israel and the Jewish community is so badly...
Speak up.
How is it that the Jewish community and Israel are so badly losing the propaganda war that's taking place in this country?
That's a tough question.
Dr. Berk could probably speak to this far more knowingly than I can. I'm going to give you at least my view, and I suppose reasonable minds can disagree. Post-Holocaust, I think the reflex reaction of American Jewry, including in New York, where more Jews live than anywhere outside of Israel, was that when there was an anti-Semitic incident, the strategy was don't call attention to it. Right? Call law enforcement, take what steps are necessary, wipe the swastika off the synagogue wall, but say no more. So we have not really developed muscle memory in the American Jewish community. Certainly in New York, why would we? We live in New York. I used to think my grandparents were paranoid. You know, they came from on the boat, right? But we're just not very good, because we haven't practiced it, getting our message out. And at least that's my 2 cents about that.
One of the issues we face on college campuses is that there are members of the faculty that are on the other side. And presidents of colleges have a dilemma, because if they start pulling apart the faculty, they could end up without faculty to run the classrooms. So it becomes a very delicate subject to try to calm things down without getting too verbose and creating big problems on campus. So it's a very complex thing. Stephen, would you have any comment that you'd like to make here?
Since I broke my hip, I use the bastard.
Wait a second, stay where you are. Stay where you are. Here.
Hank did a magnificent job.
Here you go. Here. Here.
Can you hear me now? Hank did a magnificent job. Let me tell you, if you really want to talk tachlis, to use the old language, in the Northeast, for sure, and in other places, faculties are overwhelmingly anti-Israeli. Just the basic fact of life. Why they are there, that's a difficult thing to answer. Some of them come from graduate schools with a left-wing bias. They've read the wrong stuff, and they buy into the narrative that Israel is a colonial state, a colonial society settled by white settlers, and that they have oppressed everybody else. It is very difficult for a college president. Believe me, I am not exonerating them. The problem for a college president is no one wants any tsaros from the faculty. The faculty doesn't have much leverage, but it has one piece of leverage, and that is a vote of no confidence in the administration. In the case of my institution, the president of Union College and the president of many colleges, this is not their last presidency. They're going to go on to another place. And what they don't need in the resume is that the faculty in their institution voted a lack of confidence in them. So that's one problem. The other is, we have learned in the history of anti-Semitism that when men and women of influence and affluence endorse anti-Semitism or remain silent, there is a problem. I presume I'm talking to an audience in which there are many people, if not most of them, are college graduates. This is the time to talk to the college administrations from whence you come. I hope you understand what I'm saying to you. This is a time to send letters to your college administrators, the people that run your institutions that you graduated from, and just tell them, we're not going to stand for this anymore. I must tell you, I'm teaching 56 years at Union College. I never worried for 55 years, almost 56 years, about the security of Jewish students or my own personal security. And Union is a fairly sleepy place. If I was a faculty member at Cornell, or Penn, or Columbia, NYU, Cooper Union, that's a different story there. and it seems to be, I think Hank alluded to this, is that our people, that is our people, college administrators and faculty, they're ready to go when it is an issue of black civil rights, Latinos, Asian Americans, whatever it may be. Again, gays, lesbian, transgender people. But it seems to be that we're outside of that. The danger here is that anti-Semitism is becoming somewhat legitimate, not only in college campuses, but throughout the United States. We have to demand of every public official, every college administrator, that he or she speak unequivocally. And this nonsense of equating anti-Semitism with Islamophobia, it is, to use the old language, narishkeit. The problem in our country is not Islamophobia. It is not Islamic students that are being harassed on college campuses. It is Jewish students that are being harassed, and we ought not to be ashamed to say that. And we have to speak out here. And we are not alone in all of this. We do have friends. There are decent people out there who are not Jewish who are rallying to our cause. So we are not alone. And I say to you, as I say to the students, above all, do not be afraid. This is the United States of America. There is no need to be afraid. Demand of our police, demand of the FBI, demand of every elected official that they become unequivocal opponents of anti-Semitism. So, in a sense, it's not only, again, defending the state of Israel. That comes first. I may have gotten into trouble at my own institution when I tell alumni who, I'm there 56 years, there are lots of alumni that have taken my class. I've taught almost 12,000 students. I say to them, I try to be more elegant. This is a time when every Jewish charitable dollar goes to Israel and Jewish causes in the United States. Every single dollar. If we do not take care of ourselves, no one will take care of us. Do not be afraid to say that, and it is one of the things that we can do to help ourselves and to help the state of Israel.
Okay, and we're ready to do that. Thank you. And now, Hank.
One more question. First of all, let me put in a plug for an organization that we work with called JewishUnpacked.com. They put out some short videos that are outstanding. We're going to use them to help educate our students, our high school kids, our middle school kids. They put out social media content. Check it out and introduce your kids to it. Okay, last question for Hank. How is the money that is collected by the Jewish Federation system being spent?
In a myriad of ways that every member of this community would take great pride seeing how it's spent. Let me answer the question by telling you what the needs are. The psychosocial needs, psychological and trauma-related treatment, the medical care and attention, people with special needs, clothing, food, care packages, everything but military supplies that would be needed by a suffering population. And it can only come from the diaspora. It can only come from American Jewry. The Israeli population is fighting a war. Local philanthropists are doing what they can do, but they don't have nearly the resources that the Jewish community across the world can. So, I look to all of you, and I know some of you have already given. Let me sort of say again and again and again, this war will not be over in a day. It will not be over in a week. It will not be over in a month. We are looking at a war that's going to take some time. And with the economy, as Neil pointed out, that is shuttered down, they desperately need our help.
Thank you.
To everyone on the stage and to Professor Berk, I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you very much for your wise words and inspiration. We're going to end this program with two important things. We'll call up Rabbi Spitzer.
Mindy, too close.
Rabbi Spitzer to lead us in a prayer, and then we'll end with the singing of Hatikva with our cellist. Thank you.
We were going to raise money. What are we going to do?
Thank you. Thank you. Avinu Shabbat Tzur Yisrael v'goalo. Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu. Hagen alea be'evrat chastecha, ufros alea sukat shlomecha. Ushlach orcha v'mitcha l'rashea, sareha v'yoatzea, v'taknem beitza tova milfanecha. Chazek et yedei miginei eretz kodshenu. V'anchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, v'ateret nitzachon tatrem. V'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam liyoshvea. V'nomar Amen. Avinu Shabbat stronghold and redeemer of the people Israel, bless the state of Israel, the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them. Crown their efforts with triumph. Bless this land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen. If you aren't already standing, I invite you to rise.
We have some work to do first, sir. We got to raise some money. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. Hank, we got to raise some money.
Back of your program, just to make it as easy, are a variety of ways for you to give. I think I said before, but I will say again, this is our moment. If not us, then who?
I'm going to step up, and I hope others here will do the same thing. There's forms you can fill out. Is that correct? Forms you can fill out. I've already sent a big check to Hadassah Hospital, and I am going to pledge another $100,000. Who else is going to step up and help us? We need everybody's help. Do what you can do. What are you able to do? Whatever it is that you're able to do and you can do it with a good conscience, do it. Now's the time. Anybody?
Thank you very much. To all of you who came, thank you so much for coming. Safe travels home. And remember, 100% of all donations go to the cause. Thank you so much.